So in this chapter, we're going to be talking about camera and computer arts. The earliest written record about reflected imagery comes from a Chinese philosopher, Mo Ti. In the 5th century BCE, he noted that light passing through a pinhole formed an exact but upside-down image of the world. In the 4th century BCE, the Greek philosopher Aristotle noted a similar ability of light in duplicating an image. And in the 11th century CE, the Arab mathematician and physicist known in the West as Al-Hazzan deduced that the human eye worked largely on the same principle. However, it was not until the 16th century that someone managed to construct a device to harness this property of light. This device is known as a camera obscura. As always, we will discuss these terms in detail as we go over the chapter of the camera and computer arts. Computer arts, meaning digital images, editing, and animation. Camera obscura, originally invented as a drawing tool to understand linear perspective. Daguerreotype, early form of photography on a copper plate. Celluloid film, a way to string images together. Auteur, the author who controls the film. Dada, anti-art movement aimed at ending complacency. And pop, imagery of the popular mass-produced culture. There's also a quick short film on a class that created their own camera obscura in the folder this week. Camera obscura comes from Latin meaning dark room. It was first invented during the Renaissance as a drawing tool for perspective and proportion. Artists would take the portable tool outside. The image would appear upside down and was traced onto a sheet of paper. This is how your eye works too. Your brain reverses the image again. Later, artists invented a lens to focus the blurry image, which helped them refine the technique for creating chiaroscuro. It is no surprise that Leonardo da Vinci was the first to create a camera obscura that would allow for the artist to actually get inside and trace the image coming through a small hole. It is highly debatable who to credit with inventing the first fixed image. Daguerre was a leading entrepreneur and received most of the credit, though he and Niepce both made great strides in this race. Niepce experienced with a coated pewter plate to create heliographs for the first permanent photographs, which he had an exposure time of 8 hours. Daguerre perfected the daguerreotype using a copper plate, which created a clearer image and a much shorter exposure time. Subjects had to remain motionless without blinking for several minutes, which explains the expressionless image in antique photographs. This was less expensive and less time-consuming than having your portrait painted, and it became very popular. Painters felt competition for the first time and began to explore their views and ideas as opposed to recording nature or painting portraits. This paved the way for modern art, and we explore this in detail later on in the semester. This photo, made in 1839, is one of the Daguerre's earliest images, in which one man stood still for the required 10 to 20 minute exposure and is the only sign of the bustling crowd. He was getting his shoes shined. There were other people present, but they didn't show up because of the long exposure time. The daguerreotype image cannot be reproduced, as the plate is the negative and the photograph. Photograph portraits quickly became a phenomenon in Europe and North America. The next step in photography was to produce a technology for creating negatives or reverse images that could be produced in multiples. Matthew Brady is probably the best-known early American photographer. He opened his own photo studio in New York City in 1844 using daguerreotypes. Toward the middle of the 19th century, the negative process was developed, which produced a negative on glass. That was the process used by Brady when he took this photo of Abraham Lincoln. Exposure times were still quite long, and when posing for a photograph, the subject had to stay very still for up to 30 seconds. To ensure that the subject would stay still, a neck brace or pole was placed behind the subject. It is said that is why so many subjects being photographed had such stern looks on their face. Matthew Brady is remembered for his portrait photography of famous Americans, but is also well known for his photographs of the Civil War, and in particular, battlefield scenes. Most with dead soldiers after the battle, of the carnage left from the war. Julia Cameron utilized lighting, a major tool for all photographers, to its full effect, and her photos were highly sought after. They photographed many famous subjects such as Tennyson, Longfellow, and Darwin. Some of her best work, however, was of her niece, Julia Jackson. Her style of photography was to use a soft focus. It was called pictorialism. Of course, portraits remain a major source of income for photographers today. By the 1880s, exposure time was reduced to a fraction of a second, allowing the camera to capture life as it happened. In 1888, an American named George Eastman developed the Kodak camera that changed photography forever. Here is an example of that early camera. It was light and small, and it was very portable. The camera was preloaded with film. According to the Eastman Kodak slogan, users simply press a button and we do the rest. Users sent the camera to the company, and they printed photographs and reloaded the camera for you and then returned both. Photography quickly became an affordable hobby and a way to record moments in time, and what we call sometimes today a snapshot. This 1910 photograph records one such moment in the life of a Crow Indian family, possibly a naming ceremony. The photographer, Richard Schroesel, was a Cree Indian who was adopted by the Crow people. There are very few photographs remaining that document this Indian culture. Originally, artists were sent to draw images or create prints of news events. It was not until the 1900s that photomechanical reproduction allowed photos to be printed at high speed on ordinary paper, along with text, and it became the competition for printmaking artists. Audiences today prefer the photo for reporting news events rather than an artist's interpretation. At the time, it was said that the camera cannot lie, and photojournalism was born. Dorothea Lange was employed through the WPA, the Work Projects Administration, to record images such as this one depicting the tragedy of the Depression's effect on families. Note the triangular composition made popular during the Renaissance. This was her most popular photograph and was offered free to newspapers and magazines to use. It changed and altered opinions all over America when it came to those suffering through the Great Depression in areas like Oklahoma. Remember this image. It is an important milestone in photography. Photographs bear witness and documents our history. This image, taken in New York City, marks the end of World War II. It's a really famous image. For many years, people claimed to be the soldier or the nurse. No one has been definitely identified as the subjects. Eisenstadt is famous for his photos of famous people such as Marilyn Monroe, Albert Einstein, and former President Bill Clinton. but kissing on VJ Day is still his best known image. Stiglitz, the founder of the famous Gallery 291, which brought modern art to America, sought to define pure and straight photography in which the artist does not manipulate the truth. This is one of his more famous images, a formal compositional study, which is considered to be the first art photo. This diagonal composition was not created, but rather discovered and captured by the artist. Remember this image, the steerage, by Stiglitz. Other photographers planned and composed their composition, just like painters. Henry Peach Robinson actually set up his subject matter, posed the hired actors, and combined 5 separate negatives to create this image. Not by overlapping them, but by creating stencils to block out part of the image during the exposure process. The actors were never in the same room at the same time. Photography is now considered an art form and can be combined with other art processes like photo silkscreen, talked about in the last chapter. Artists sought to alter the objective nature of photography to include an artistic viewpoint. Through the digital manipulation of photos, we can no longer say the camera does not lie. By the way, do you remember what artist was married to Alfred Stieglitz? Georgia O'Keeffe. Ansel Adams is known as a master 20th century landscape photographer. Many believe he is the greatest photographer to ever live. I am among one of those people. Ansel was a scientist first, then an artist, then a photographer. He was part of the F-64 group who refined a crystal clear focus for a wide depth of field. Note the detail in both the foreground and the background. He shared the pure photography belief that it is a point of honor to capture compositions as they exist in nature. His work included the time-consuming task of travel, finding a vantage viewpoint, and achieving optimum lighting in optimum weather conditions, all of which creates the composition. Then the professional photographer begins the technical darkroom aspects of developing and printing. Ansel Adams used an 8x10 negative for his work, which gives it great clarity. We use, or used to use, 35mm negative in our cameras. Photograph negatives are made up of tiny silver particles. This photograph is an example of a gelatin silver print. I think the text should have more work by Ansel Adams. Remember these photos for your test. Hannah Hawk, on the other hand, used found images and printed photographs and text to portray the overwhelming experience of modern life as it is flooded by the images and printed material. The word Dada that appears in this collage refers to an art movement that formed as a reaction to the unprecedented slaughter in World War II. It is defined as an anti-art movement aimed at ending complacency. The Dada Manifesto of 1918 stated that art was visibly shattered by the explosions. Hawk's collages shatter images and printed information to form a frenzied image of torn lives. Man Ray also delved into the ideas of Dada, but went further by tossing away the camera and working instead with light-sensitive paper in a dark room. Experimenting with time and objects suspended at varied angle and distance from the light source, he developed a technique he called the rayograph or rayogram. The shadow of the objects appeared as light shapes against the darkened paper in a mysterious version of reality. We call these photograms now. Once again, we see artists take a traditional art material and experiment with it to create new art. In the 1930s, color photography was becoming popular for advertising, while serious photographers mostly worked in black and white until the 60s and 70s. I still love black and white photography. I mean, think about the cabbage photo by Weston. Cindy Sherman uses color photography to create self-portraits in which she poses as various personalities. Called Untitled, the viewer naturally tries to invent a story for this woman. We find ourselves making assumptions based on stereotypes we have absorbed from films, television, and advertising. Digital cameras and printers have allowed artists to print photographs without a darkroom. The use of computer software like Photoshop and scanners have offered new possibilities for the manipulation of digital and traditional photographs. Today, artists freely and creatively manipulate images so that the lines between methods have disappeared. Andreas Gursky scanned 2 negatives into the computer and merged them. This image is almost 10 feet in height. As you have read in your text, censorship also plays a role in the arts. These are just a couple of images by Robert Mapplethorpe. I don't feel at all comfortable showing you many of his photos from his Portfolio X series. Now, with that being said, am I censoring work that you see in the class? Or am I concerned about the community standard? Actually, I'm doing both. If a controversy over showing you the work would overwhelm my goal in your appreciating the majority of the artwork you see, then I think my showing you the work would be a bad idea. So what do you think of communities censoring artwork? And what do you think about using federal funds to sponsor work that is controversial? Are you okay with the tax dollars funding this type of artwork? Another more recent controversy was when an artist, Andre Serrano, took a photograph of a small plastic Jesus on a cross, and he submerged it in a glass of his own urine. The artist's comments on his work is, "This work is not intended to denounce religion. It alludes to a perceived commercialization or cheapening of Christian icons in contemporary culture." As those who look at and appreciate art, we will constantly be confronted with work that excites us and repels us, and only individually can we actually make determinations on the art that is most controversial to us. In Ansel Adams' time, photos were the truth, but now the truth may be skewed by altering photographs. On the left of this original mugshot of O.J. Simpson, the Newsweek cover in the original mugshot, whereas the Time cover is digitally manipulated. This was one of the first news photos to be altered. O.J. Simpson's face appears darker, blurrier, and unshaven. The photographer that manipulated the picture said that he wanted it to make it more artful and more compelling. It is here that the ethical issues arise. News photographs must be authentic or not be published at all. Any manipulation distorts the truth. It is clear that on the cover of Time, O.J. looks more sinister than he does on the cover of Newsweek. In the first image, we see Kate Winslet, the actress, Any idea which one is the real one, the one that is the truth? The one on the left is really her. She has been made to look heavier by a tabloid for a story. In September 2008, this photo of former Governor Sarah Palin was widely distributed across the internet shortly after Palin was announced as the vice presidential nominee for the Republican ticket. Shortly after its release, the photo was revealed to be a composite of Palin's head and someone else's body. So what impact does a photo like this have on the political process? August 2006, these photographs by Adnan Haj, a Lebanese photographer, showed thick black smoke rising above buildings in the Lebanese capital of Beirut after an Israeli air raid. The Reuters news agency initially published this photograph on the website and then withdrew it when it became evident that the original image had been manipulated to show more and darker smoke. Haj has denied deliberately attempting to manipulate the image, saying that he was just trying to remove dust marks and he made mistakes during the bad lighting conditions he was working under. The head of the public relations for Reuters said, "This represents a serious breach of Reuters standards, and we shall not be accepting or using pictures by him." The second photograph by Raj was also determined to have been altered. Why do you think the photographer created this photo with more smoke? Ethical questions will continue to be a source of concern with photography now that anyone and any photo can be altered to fit someone's political ideas or other bias. MyBridge was hired to settle a $25,000 bet that a horse has all 4 feet on the ground at one instance. He set up 12 cameras and a tripwire to prove this is the case. This led him to develop stop-motion photography and the study of motion. Today, this fast shutter and film speed is widely utilized in sports photography. He later combined successive images in a spinning wheel, similar to a flip book, called a zoopraxiscope. This led to the search for continuous motion photography, or film. First, George Eastman experimented with celluloid film to string images together. Remember, he created the first Kodak camera. Thomas Edison is attributed with creating the first motion picture, Fred Ott's Sneeze. Lasting only a few seconds, it captures one of Edison's mechanics who could sneeze at will. With the invention of the projector from the Lumiere brothers, the film industry was born in a Paris cafe. Coincidentally, their surname, Lumiere, means light in French. The French filmmaker Millet created this imaginary tale 1 year before the Wright brothers' first flight. This 14-minute film is the first science fiction film where scientists are shot to the moon via a space gun. He used painted scenery and stop-motion photography to create special effects with real objects and people. To make an umbrella transform magically into a mushroom, he filmed the scientist holding an umbrella, stopped the camera, and then resumed filming with the same scientist holding a mushroom. McKay shot the film Gertie, the trained dinosaur, 1 frame at a time and used images drawn in sequence. Animation is very time-consuming, requiring 12 to 24 drawings per second of running time. An animated 3-minute cartoon would require over 4,000 drawings. Gertie could be considered the ancestor of Mickey Mouse, and she was the first animated creature to have a distinct personality. McKay, who was already a successful stage performer and cartoonist, would interact with Gertie's image as it was projected on the sketch pad, set on an easel, as if his drawings were coming to life. As films became popular around the world, large film studios were created. Paramount, Warner Brothers, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, MGM, just to name a few. Films also became big-budget operations, coordinating hundreds of people, which required a producer, and in this case, Gone with the Wind, that was David O. Selznick. We all know the story, written by Margaret Mitchell. This is one of the first big-budget films in color. Orson Welles was 26 years old when he made the film Citizen Kane. He produced, directed, and starred in the film. It did not achieve critical success when it was made, but now is thought of as a film masterpiece because of his ingenious and artistic camera use. Welles calculated every camera shot to evoke the mood he wanted to achieve in film, a technique used often in today's films. In the 1950s, expressive, independent directors with consistent individual styles came to be known as auteurs, French for authors. They usually controlled as many aspects of the film as possible. The movement became known as the New Wave. One of the first New Wave films was Jean-Luc Godard's Breathless, which was revolutionary in its editing technique. Jump cuts and abrupt changes interrupt the visual flow, creating a youthful, nervous energy. The camera is sometimes unsteady, implying that the motion of the camera operator. The film has just been newly restored for its 50th anniversary. A great film with jump cuts would be The Blair Witch Project. The two areas most affected in filming by the digital revolution are special effects and animation. Industrial Light and Magic, a company created by George Lucas, has been at the forefront of computer-generated imagery. His first film, after creating this company, was the first Star Wars film. It broke all boundaries using digital technology and special effects. And by the end of the Star Wars series, 90% of the special effects in the film were computer-generated. I think this evolution is evident in these scenes from 3 of the Star Wars movies. Video arts are intentionally designed for mass communication. The first official television broadcast in the U.S. was in 1939 for the New York World's Fair, but few individuals actually owned a TV set. Today, more homes around the globe have TV than have indoor plumbing. In combination with television screens and computer monitors, video images can be manipulated so that the truth is now indiscernible. Here we see a video where Peter Campus transforms as his images evolve within other images of himself. He seems to wipe himself away, thereby revealing other faces. The computer is more than just a tool. It's also a place where images can be created, stored, manipulated, edited, and viewed. With the development of the Internet and the World Wide Web, it has become a gateway to a global public arena. Webcams allow views around the world to be more personal. Today, we can watch friends and relatives as they record special occasions and daily activities. Steele, in his work TV Tower, had 3 video cameras installed to capture 3 sites, one each in Berlin, at a monastery in Germany, and in Manhattan. The exhibit opened on September 6th. Like Warhol's Empire, only incidentals would move or change as a video was projected onto gallery walls. The subject changed from landscape to history when 5 days after the show opening came the attack on the World Trade Center. The event of 9/11 were unexpectedly played out on the gallery walls. Today, spaces like Facebook and Instagram are places that everyday people can show their lives and view from the world to browse, interact, and communicate with. Software like GarageBand and iMovies and new video cameras like on your phone allows you to manipulate and edit digital audio and video files to produce your own movies. Most of the readers of this textbook have created their own files for viewing on the internet. How many of you have created your own iMovie? That concludes this chapter. Thank you.